Hello and welcome to the next episode of Real Cyber Talk podcast. Today we're joined by CISO of Netacea, Andy Ash. 25 years in IT, 10 years in security.
Yeah.
Give us a 15-seconder on your background.
15 seconds. So I'm currently the CISO of Netacea, let's say. I've been with Netacea Security startup in Manchester for the last 6 years. But prior to that, I worked in fintech, I've worked in development, performance, but infrastructure and service delivery was how I kind of got into security. So yeah, it's had most job titles in IT.
Perfect. And you know, I guess I met Andy a few weeks back now. And I guess one of the things that we've spoken about quite a lot since then, I think, is artificial intelligence. It's quite topical at the moment, although I think you've got your opinions on the fact that it's not necessarily a new phenomena. Why don't you just start by giving us a bit of an insight into your take on AI, and we'll see where that takes us.
Yeah, so I mean, my experience of using artificial intelligence, particularly machine learning, is with Netacea. So we started out 6 years ago as a bot management company, looking to solve what are essentially very complicated problems of malicious actors on people's websites. So we look at the general bot cases like web scraping, scalping, fake account creation, account takeover, basically things that lead to fraud on big corporate websites, on big retail websites, on big ticketing websites. So that's our background. So yeah, we're 6 years old. So the hype cycle is probably now, but I know from our experience that we've been deploying AI out into the wild for our customers for 6 years, and it's existed before then as well. We spoke about this recently. It's not necessarily new. It's not necessarily the most relevant in all cases, and we can come on to that. But it is the most spoken about thing that I've ever seen in 25 years in IT. It is the most emotive subject. Everybody who talks about how AI will affect your life, your business, the way that we make money, the way that we spend money, there is a huge amount of emotion attached to the way that people talk about that. And I think that's because there's a vision of the world that is the kind of droid army taking over and, humanity becoming, less important. And then there's the kind of utopian view that we'll all be able to retire and go on to explore the universe. On the back of AI. So there's just that broad spectrum, and there's a lot of people in between.
And this isn't a security wave at the moment, is it? This is a societal wave.
Yes,
that security is getting wrapped up in.
Yeah. How much has that conversation changed though in the last year? Because obviously new conversations about legislation and about the rules of how we engage with AI and new phobias are obviously coming up. Has that actually affected the conversations that customers are having with you?
I think people are much more aware that when we use the phrase AI, that there is a set of things they might want to do to understand what it is that we do better.
Yeah.
The majority of people that come to Netacea, in fact any security business, come because there's a problem that needs solving. So there is an attack that needs mitigating, there is visibility that is lacking that needs to be added in. Yeah. You say you do with AI. I think now there's a little bit more focus on the efficacy and actually what the AI is doing. So all the stuff with the LLMs has obviously been driving this kind of AI hype cycle. Is really a sorry, just 1 second. I've lost my train. You do edit, right?
Yeah.
You do edit, right? Good. Okay, cut. Yeah, I think basically the LLMs have brought sharp focus on what data is going into them. Mm-hmm. So, the data privacy, data protection, not wanting to leak data through LLMs is a really big deal. And I think that's put a little bit more focus on vendors who've always had them as part of the solution. So it has changed.
And what, I don't mean for this to become a doomsday podcast, but certainly when we talk about AI in the security context, the conversation has a lot been about the phobias of AI, what it's capable of doing in the hands of or when wielded by attackers.
Yeah.
What's your take on that? What are some of the phobias that we need to be thinking about, if any?
Yeah, I mean, we've done quite a lot of research into where artificial intelligence is being used to try and defraud businesses. So it's our focus, right? Mm-hmm. We definitely know that capture farms, which are used by people trying to crack accounts or scalp trainers or whatever it might be. We know that capture farms now have AI counterparts that are cheaper and actually better at bypassing capture solutions. So that is something that we've done research on. So, the attackers are already utilizing this technology. What I would say is that the attackers will only employ AI at the point that the return on investment justifies that. Because the return on investment for the attacker may be quite low. If you think about scraping attack, selling data off the back of that, the ROI on that is a volume business. Do you want to add some complex and expensive artificial intelligence into that attack chain? Probably not. But where the ROI is huge and you have secondary markets already, like ticketing, trainers, there are secondary markets to sell these goods after they've been scalped, then absolutely you would want to. People are paying the mortgages on the back of being able to do these attacks. So yes, AI is absolutely possible where the ROI is justified. Definitely.
Tom, you've been an ethical hacker for a long time. I guess it wouldn't be too difficult for you to put yourselves in the mind of someone with your skill set with a slightly different motive. What's your take on what this technology could do for the malicious side of our industry?
I think the big one that seems pretty obvious to me is highly tailored and specific social engineering campaigns. That seems to be a massive area of opportunity. I think maybe partly because there's a lot of hype around generative AI specifically, but the idea that you can point a bot at somebody's online presence, which is massive these days, it can capture every personal piece of information about them and then create a very specific tailored email to them in mass, target 100,000 staff business, and each one of those gets a personalized email. I can't, I would imagine that the effectiveness of those campaigns of being able to actually get payloads to land or get people to click on links or get whatever it is that the objective of that is to be successful is just going to exponentially increase the efficacy of phishing attacks. And
it's funny you say that, because if you come away from the security world and step into the sales domain, I know it's quite difficult for you technical people sometimes, but every business has sales teams, and every sales team, as part of this AI wave, is looking at hyper personalization at scale. That's what we call it in the sales world. How can we get maximum bang for our buck in terms of number of leads generated for little money put in, and that comes down to how can we deliver things like emails that are highly personalized without necessarily having human input, right? And that's virtually the same.
It's
thing.
exactly the same. It's exactly the same thing. The tools absolutely cross over.
Yeah.
I have a threat research team, and we do look at the phishing. We obviously Netacea get phishing from a security business. You would expect us to be phishing. We have a little look at the backstory of some of these. They look like they're running outreach campaigns. If you ever respond, it looks like it's and like you say, if you add into that, obviously the generative side of this is reasonably frightening.
Yeah.
And everybody's now going to have to learn how to read and understand an LLM generated message. Like you would know that tells used to be that it didn't come across as English as the first language. That was a tell in a phishing email. Yeah. That's now not it. But if you add in deep fakes, so my favourite sort of marketing outreach to me is somebody sending me a video, and if this goes on LinkedIn, I expect to get more of them. But basically, people do send you videos now. Yeah. I've seen a lot of really good deep fake videos, and that's not this year that's going to be a problem and cheap enough to run the campaigns, but soon enough it will be. So you could be getting videos of people who look like people you know.
Yeah.
And it comes back to, in all of this, including what we do in Netacea, especially with anything to do with fake accounts or credential stuff and account takeover, proof of life is going to be really important. That's going to be one of the in a world that is kind of dominated by individuals, and identity can't be guaranteed.
Yeah.
How do you know who you're speaking to? And that's going to be a significant problem.
Definitely.
Because if you send me one of your many marketing emails, Ben.
Go on
But actually, it's a video of you telling me that click on this link because you've got some offer.
Yeah.
And it looks like you and it sounds like you,
Mm.
but it's not you. And I click that link.
Mm.
That is a very real threat. That's not beyond the realms of probability now.
It's interesting as well because one of the most successful phishing campaigns that I've ever run just ripped directly from one of the most spammy looking campaigns that I've ever seen, which is you just send everybody an email that just says, "Is this you?" and a link. Which if you then send somebody that and it actually is them, superimposed in whatever situation, those sorts of campaigns, I dread to think how much that's going to peak. And that's not very expensive, right? We can do that now. There's literally apps on your phone that can do that in a matter of seconds. So I would imagine the impact of that is ridiculous.
And there's very little you can do as well. There's sort of technical things you can do to prevent things like phishing emails. But when we're talking about LinkedIn messages, and all these other different mediums that you've got for contacting people, there's not an awful lot you can do as a security team within a business. And then we go off into a tangent to talk about whether we think security awareness training works, for the majority at the moment, because you'd like to think that if you've got a solid security awareness training program, that simply just needs updated and upgraded and to combat modern threats. But if you've not got something that is working correctly for the threats we face today, are we going to have something that's correct for the future?
There's a lot of education. The other place that AI in attacks is an interesting, really interesting, is that a lot of network and application attacks, so like DDoS, but lower level, more complicated than a DDoS attack. So a lot of the sort of cred stuff attacks that we see actually come across as DDoS attacks. They look like DDoS attacks. And there's two sides in that. There's the defensive, which we're defending, and there's the attacker. And quite often the attacker runs out of either steam, because we'll be defending and blocking, mitigating that threat. And they'll kind of run out of steam and the attack will stop. And maybe they'll start again in a bit. And that's because it's been run by a human, right? And that human has to go to bed and eat, and they have to source the resource to actually maintain, because normally these attacks are coming from hugely diverse data centers, proxy networks, residential proxy networks, and they have to source that and pay for that or steal it or however they're actually attaining those resources. And eventually they just run out of steam, and then they'll try again in a couple of weeks. What AI might add to that is, as the coordinator of these attacks, is that they might never stop. Yeah. And that is a frightening thought. That is something. Whereas, the majority of these attacks will be being blocked at WAF, then bot management, etc. And you've got your defensive depth, but at some point, some of it will get through. There will be humans in the loop, stopping this and writing WAF rules and doing all the SOC work that's so important. And at what point do they have a break? Well, it's quite often when the attack stops. We're already under resourced in security. So the idea of the non-stop attack that continually evolves, that's kind of the Terminator. It's not Terminator, it's like the Borg. It's that kind of like the unseen enemy that it just starts and never stops. Nobody knows why. It's like you can't tell the machine can't tell you what its return on investment is, but it's just been set going. And the longer it runs, the more money it makes from attackers. So.
But the optimistic part of me wants to say this is just the next evolution of the cat and mouse game, right?
Yes.
Where yes, the attack will go on forever, but the defense will go on forever. You don't have to have people on call 24/7 in order to, orchestrate your response plan. You've got that system in place, and it just executes in the background. I think the idea that we can handle a lot of that responsibility off and burn less people out means that we can start actually focusing on some of the problems that AI maybe can't solve as a security team at the moment. It's just being wasted doing things that absolutely can be automated.
I think that is absolutely the opportunity for businesses, but security vendors and security people in those businesses is exactly that. It's using the AI to get people into a more strategic role. And there was loads of phrases all this year. So out of the cockpit and into air traffic control. There's a load of stuff about how AI should be enabling people. The data sets are not human readable anymore. Well, they never have been, but they're not human readable now. So that there's always been an element of curation,
Mm-hmm.
but it's better if that curation is done using, language models or anomaly detection, or whatever it might be,
Yeah.
and present that information up in a way that humans can actually make strategic decisions on the back of it.
Definitely. And I guess that forms a nice little segue into staying with the topic of AI, but as we sort of see businesses rushing out to adopt this technology, and as we've already alluded to here, there's a big difference between LLMs, machine learning, and all these other different things that fall into this bucket that is artificial intelligence. Is there anywhere that you can see on face value that we really AI shouldn't be touching, and that it shouldn't be replacing?
So I mean, there's an ethical aspect to this, and there's a data protection aspect to this. But what I would say is, from experience, AI is actually expensive. So if you don't need AI to solve the problem, if you could solve the problem by writing something on a piece of paper, you wouldn't use AI, right? Now, a lot of the problems we're trying to solve don't look like that, so, that aren't that simple. But if there is no reason, there's no value. If the problem is already a solved problem, then AI isn't required. AI may not be required where essentially efficacy, where human efficacy is perceived to be better than the AI. Now, we've spoken about this before, why AI is being held to a higher standard of efficacy than humans are. But in kind of very niche cases, so, the doctors and decision trees, doctors and AI, there's a difference. So expert systems have been in place in medicine for decades, right? That help people make decisions based on, I'm not a doctor, so I don't know, but based on symptoms, based on presentation of now, AI might not be relevant to use in those situations just because of the appetite of the patient to be diagnosed by someone who isn't human. And that seems reasonable. I think what that gets in the way of is, one, the AI is probably better at diagnosing than doctors are. Doctors make bad decisions, but also the throughput that you can get from the automation of doing this should mean that services are available to more people. It's a difficult balance, but I can understand that you might not want to go into the doctor's surgery, speak to a robot, and this is like terrible imagination time. Speak to a robot, and the robot says, "Okay, you need to take these pills." I can't imagine my mum doing that. I can't imagine that.
I saw a similar thing when it was judges, judges and sentencing, and the evidence, the stark evidence actually that shows and demonstrates the unconscious bias in sentences. This isn't necessarily on convictions, nothing to do with juries, but in terms of sentences dished out to people of different ethnicities, of different origins, etc. And how sentencing could potentially be done by an AI that maybe doesn't have the same unconscious bias that inevitably our current system has, right? The evidence is pretty damning. So I think you've always got that, and the doctor thinks a very similar argument, right? It's like, is it definitely better in certain settings in terms of points of pros? But inevitably you're always going to get that kind of, are we letting a machine decide what's wrong with someone, or what someone gets as a sentence or something, etc.
And I think it's I can only you go back to people right? And I know enough people that wouldn't accept that. To know that it isn't going to be my doctor's surgery anytime soon.
No.
Even if it was more efficient, we got better results. It's not about to change. Anytime soon. And then, like I say, we were talking about return on investment of AI. Anywhere where you're not going to get a return on investment, and that could be as an attacker, right? It's the same argument. It's like if you can get what you need by running whatever kind of attack, web scraping attack or account takeover, if you can do that without AI, why would you employ it? Because it'll cost you more money, you'll get less return. I think that the interesting bit, and it's like the cat and mouse game, it's the war of attrition or the arms race, whatever we want to call it, security. I think as soon as we do start to use AI to block attacks, you'll see AI to try and get around that, and it will just keep stepping up. So the use cases for not employing AI will reduce over time. I know you have a strong opinion on this, Tom. Spoke about it.
Yeah, I think sort of going back to what you were saying about the doctor's surgery and the people wouldn't be willing to do that, and you'd understand people wouldn't be willing to do that. I think, yeah, if you stick a robot in front of somebody, they're probably not going to trust it like they trust a human. But people already let AI run ridiculous amounts of their life. They let AI hand them the results that they get when they Google something. They let AI tell them how to spell a word. They let AI drive their cars and determine whether or not to take an umbrella when they leave the house every day. So the ability to interweave AI into things, it's sort of it's more hard to distinguish and hard to understand that what you're looking at is a decision being made by some sort of impossible to interpret algorithm. So being able to get to that point, I think, is going to make people much more receptive to accepting AI as a component of their life, or just not being aware that it is a component of their life. Now, there are massive inherent risks in doing that, because we've been shown, you hear about that delusional aunt at, Christmas is coming up, that delusional aunt at Christmas that believes in the QAnon conspiracy theories because the algorithm has just forced them down this YouTube rabbit hole where they're presented this echo chamber of information over and over and over again. So maybe we should be more transparent about it, but also maybe we shouldn't be quite so willing to just start calling everything AI and scaring everybody with this fact like it's some new revolution, when, as we've spoken about so far, it's just an intrinsic part of everyday life already.
I agree completely. And I did say I have a limited imagination, so I can only imagine a robot doctor dispensing pills to my nan. So that's as far as I can take it, I'm afraid. So,
real conventional, like snowman type robot.
Yeah. You will take these.
No, funny story. We had I can't remember where we went. At a restaurant, and I'd never actually seen these robots that bring your food out. My 2-year-old daughter was absolutely obsessed.
My dad was obsessed, actually. It's a Japanese restaurant, isn't it?
Something like that, yeah. Isn't it amazing how your dad and my 2-year-old daughter...
I wasn't there, so I think I would probably have been amazed as well. And they're not, again, that's like, you will eat this.
Okay. So, last topic we wanted to cover today. We did this actually a couple of podcasts ago, about the Manchester cyber tech ecosystem. I mean, anybody that knows me and Tom will know how much we are big proponents of the Manchester cyber ecosystem, with the construction of DISH as a digital information security hub, for anybody listening, as an investment that Manchester City Council has made to back cyber in Manchester, back startups for cyber security in Manchester, and how we definitely felt like the red carpet had been rolled out for us when we set off on this mission. But I wanted to cover it again today because you work for a cybersecurity company in Manchester that has been going for a little bit more than a year. So, maybe what we're seeing now is part of that legacy, is part of what was actually started a long time ago. And obviously rich history with the likes of NCC Group and, I think Portswigger's only out in Knutsford. So what's your take on Manchester as a cybersecurity hub? Particularly if we look, and I know you've got a bit of an understanding of the global landscape for cyber, and obviously New York, San Francisco, Israel, Tel Aviv, big hotspots. Is Manchester in that category, or could it be?
It can be. It absolutely can be. I mean, I've lived in Manchester since I was an adult, basically, and despite being a Liverpool fan, football-wise, I absolutely love Manchester, and it's my life, basically, and it is incredible to watch the city grow as it has. I mean, I kind of left the city centre about 10 years ago, give or take, and to keep coming back in now, and just seeing the mushrooming of businesses and the skyline and the money that's been put in is absolutely incredible. There is no reason why Manchester cannot be that kind of incubator centre for not just cyber but all tech business. There's always been tech businesses in Manchester. I mean, you look at the universities, and it might not be the tech that we recognise, but sort of clothing, manufacturing, textiles. This was a world centre for a very long time, and that I think it's part of the fabric of the city that there is innovation in. So even when we started 6 years ago, there were lots of cyber businesses about. There's a lot of angel investment for businesses who want to get up, and Dish is absolutely brilliant for you guys. It was a bit late for us. We'd already been through that kind of starter line, that initial seed phase.
But I wonder how much of a part Netacea, amongst others, played when these decisions were getting made. Because there is quite a few. Avecto was another one that I missed off as well.
Avecto, there are a few. Usecure. So they're Manchester-based startup. They're doing fantastically at the minute. There's plenty of examples. I hope we did play some part in getting that up and running. I know that our board and founders are still really active in Manchester. I hope we did play a part. I think it's interesting because you've got such an amazing set of people. The universities are such big business. That's what they are. You look at the buildings that they have now. You've got the National Computing Centre. You've got all of the old UMIS campus that is a technical university, right? That was a technical and still is a technical university. I think recruitment is reasonably straightforward. But also people would like to come and live here. So if you need to bring people into the city, if you can't automatically find them, that's unlikely. But people want to move up to Manchester. So at Netacea, we've had all manner of people moving and living in the city centre, and I think that's really great.
That's it, isn't it? I mean, it's two things, isn't it? It's funding and it's recruitment. And I guess that from Netacea's standpoint, or certainly from your standpoint within Netacea, there's never been any regrets in terms of the fact that this business is in Manchester and we've got access to recruitment and we've got access to funding.
Exactly right. And just to prove that point, we started in the Northern Quarter. We've had an office on Deansgate, and now we're down sort of on Key Street, the bonded warehouse. So we've jumped about. We've never looked outside Manchester. We've never, despite our founders actually being from two different sides of the island. We're definitely a northern company, as you can tell. They're committed to the city. There was no thought of moving out to Knutsford.
When we set up, there was I was obviously Manchester based, but Thomas was based down in Cheltenham. Obviously, Cheltenham has its cybersecurity over everything, and the initial plan was for Thomas to run a technical team down there and for me to run a commercial team up here. But once Thomas had come up to see Dish a few times, had some chats with the universities nearby, it just became so obvious, didn't it?
It was a conversation actually, I think, with one of the directors at GCHQ, because they just moved a lot of their operations to Manchester, and he pointed out that. So first of all, he's told a sort of story about how they, paid some consultancy to do a bunch of research, find somewhere where they've got good access to talent and a lot of diversity, and paid them ridiculous amounts of money, and lo and behold, they said move to London. They couldn't afford London, so Manchester was second on the list. But then he pointed out that one of the things that they did highlight, Manchester is one of the only places where you've got 5 universities within a 45-minute commute. You've got about 10 universities within an hour and a half commute of the office, and people are moving, particularly young people who are skilled, are moving into places like Manchester. Whereas if you look at places like Cheltenham, I don't want to talk bad on it, still my hometown. But people are keen to move away from those kinds of areas at the moment. And when he pointed that out to me, and I sort of looked at where my friends had gone, and I looked at where I was talking to the people and I'm interviewing people for roles, I realised it's not even really going to take much thinking about. I think I started looking at apartments the next day.
Yeah. Of which there are many. And I could tell you some stories about the old Manchester where there were none and nobody lived in the city centre. But maybe another day.
Well, I think that just about rounds us off for the session. Thanks for coming. Andy. And yeah, thanks for listening to the Cyber Talk podcast.